Fires are a pretty familiar sight to every man on the department. Fires in homes, garages, schools, factories, fires every place. Over 50 a day, more than 20,000 a year in Los Angeles. Sure, we extinguish them and do a darn good job. We're a Class 1 fire department, one of the best in the nation. Few can question our efficiency. But what about the cause? How do they start? Do you make an effort to find out? You should. It's an important part of your job. There's more to this business of preserving life and property than control, extinguishment, and cleanup. It's of greater importance to prevent a fire than it is to fight one. But only by knowing the causes of fires can we successfully prevent their recurrence. The success of public educational campaigns, fire prevention inspection, fire regulation enforcement, and the apprehension of incendiarists is dependent on knowing how fires start. As you well know, we maintain an arson detail. Complete investigation of suspicious fires requires time and patience. It involves the establishing of the point of origin, the collecting and preservation of evidence, the interviewing of witnesses and suspects, making arrests, signing complaints, and the preparation of comprehensive reports to better enable a trial attorney to successfully prosecute those suspected of the crime of arson. Such detailed work can't be expected from the man on firefighting duty. However, experienced arson investigators unanimously agree that the key to successful investigation is the alertness on the part of firefighters in recognizing the unusual. Far too often, it's destroyed by water or is scooped up and thoughtlessly pitched out a window during overhauling operations. Use your head before you use your shovel. You men are the first to arrive at a fire. There's plenty to think about until you have it under control. But then, when the immediate emergency is over, and before you start overhauling, the observations you make and the action you take can be of great importance. This can make or break a successful investigation. Bear in mind that when an arson investigator arrives on the scene, he must start from scratch. He has no information, no definite starting point. What you did, what you saw, and what you found might save him endless hours of investigation. Most fires start from natural causes that are pretty obvious even before fire occurs. Experienced firemen are quick in recognizing the leaders in this group. The careless smoker, illegal burning, incinerators, heaters and stoves, electricity, and children with matches. Unfortunately, the reported causes of many of these fires is inaccurate. Because of the excessive number that occur each year, there's a marked tendency to form an opinion without due consideration of all the visual evidence. For example, a fire involving the cushions on a Davenport might have all the earmarks of a careless smoker. But if the fire occurred on a hot day in August and a $1,500 fur coat just happened to be lying across the Davenport, it would be reasonable to assume the fire was not as accidental as it first appeared. With occupants absent, a dwelling fire might appear to have been caused by carelessness if charred clothing draped over a chair was found too close to a heater. But if you found dresser drawers with clothing hanging out, it would certainly be worthy of further investigation. Observations of this sort should be passed on to arson investigators. Yes, experienced firefighters are quick in recognizing fires that appear to have been started from natural causes. But that very experience can be misleading. Always look for unnatural circumstances. snap judgment can be highly inaccurate. Fires are usually reported as undetermined when there is a lack of an obvious or natural cause. The mere lack of a natural cause does not necessarily make a fire incendiary, but all of them should be viewed with suspicion. Thorough investigation should be made. Incendiary fires are fires that have been willfully and maliciously set. Generally speaking, they follow pretty regular patterns and can be classified under 5 different types. A knowledge of the general patterns of these fires can be extremely useful in helping to determine the cause. The grudge or spite fire is the fire set to scare or to destroy the property of another. It might well be considered a form of childish revenge, although adults are usually responsible, men and women alike. A common example is that of a jealous sweetheart who thinks she's being two-timed. In the absence of her light of love, she stacks his clothes in the center of the room, pours on a little lighter fluid, and then touches it off. Grudge or spite fires are the most dangerous. Obviously, such fires are set with the intent to create as much destruction as possible. Fortunately, they're in the minority. In any case, it is seldom the intent of this type of incendiarist to kill or cause bodily injury to others. A good scare, a sort of "you'd better be careful in the future" attitude is what they have in mind. Fires in this category are seldom planned. They seem to be a spur-of-the-moment proposition. They usually occur at night. Flammable liquids are often used, and with few exceptions, interrogation of the occupant or owner of the premises will provide the necessary clue as to who the culprit is, definitely typed by the evidence. The fire for profit, or the insurance fire as it's more commonly called, is a little bit more ingenious. These fires may involve burning buildings, burning merchandise, a combination of both, or the destruction of business records. Elaborate igniting devices are sometimes used. Mechanical and electrical apparatus so designed as to give the arsonist ample time to put as much distance as possible between himself and the premises before the fire starts. The alibi, "I wasn't near the place when the fire occurred," is as time-worn as some of the methods used. Candles are common igniters, often used in combination with trails leading from one room to another. Trails that sometimes end in wooden tubs of gasoline from which the metal hoops have been removed. Such tubs are tied with string that burns through quickly. As the tub gives way, the flaming gas spreads rapidly and burns with great intensity. Some arson plants, as they are commonly called, are a lot more fantastic. This setup was designed to ignite a bunch of matches when the telephone rang. It worked, too, but the evidence was left behind. Often the methods are so elaborate, the arsonist outsmarts himself. The absence of a natural cause, too rapid spread, too intensifier for the location and the materials burning, are reasons enough to be suspicious. Interrogation of suspects and witnesses by arson investigators usually establishes the motive, which is selling the mortgage or personal property to the insurance company. In business establishments, obsolete machinery, expired leases, and unsaleable merchandise are more often than not the motive for insurance fires. Fires set to cover another crime, such as murder or burglary, are not too frequent. However, there are incidents on record where discovery of the motive behind this type of fire has led to the apprehension and conviction of the arsonist. Normally, there is not too much pre-planning. A crime of violence committed without premeditation might well leave the perpetrator conscience-stricken and highly fearful of the consequences. Grasping at any straw, he sets fire to the premises in the hope that the fire will be accepted as the cause of the victim's death, or that it will conceal the fact that a burglary was committed. At fires where fatalities have occurred, it is well to check carefully for the cause of fire. Once again, lack of an obvious or natural cause calls for more intensive investigation. Fires set to cover a burglary are usually started when a culprit feels that he has bungled a job by some careless act, such as leaving fingerprints or obvious signs of forcible entry. Motive often helps in determining cause. However, it's the exception to the rule to find an arsonist who sets a fire that appears natural in every respect. Fourth, we have the pyromaniac, whose motive for starting fires is sex gratification. Panic-stricken occupants, sirens, apparatus rolling through the night, firemen in action. All of this seems to add to the intense physical pleasure of the true pyro. The fires they start and the milling crowds of people provide the necessary excitement. This form of perversion often manifests itself at an early age. Individuals thus affected usually start out with small fires, igniting combustibles in trash cans, waste baskets, a pile of old newspapers and the like. They're responsible for many of the rubbish fires you've responded to in alleys during the night. Undetected, their lustful appetites demand more fires, bigger fires, more excitement. They become bolder. We find them entering apartment houses and cheap hotels in the dead of night, starting fires in hall closets, under stairways, in basements. Smoke-filled halls, panic-stricken people crowding and pushing each other as they fight their way down narrow, perilous stairways, women in night clothing choking and stumbling out into the street, and the opportunity of the pyro to come into close contact with them as they stand trembling in the cold night air. As they grow older, their activities become exceedingly dangerous. An obsession to inflict serious burns, even death, have caused them to set fire to the bedclothing of a sleeping person, in some instances to resort to forcible entry to accomplish this purpose. The pyro seldom makes elaborate preparations for starting a fire. When the urge strikes him, he takes advantage of what burnable material there is at hand. Rubbish, trash, even a pocket comb will do the trick. Since he's usually smart enough to know that he must avoid detection, the cover of darkness appeals to him. When a series of fires keep occurring at night from undetermined or unnatural causes, it is generally a tip-off that a pyro is at work. This is particularly true where such fires are concentrated within a company's first-in district. The vanity pyromaniac differs from the true pyro in that his motive for setting fires is for mental rather than physical satisfaction. It is seldom his intent to let a fire reach such proportions that he can't extinguish it himself. A classic example of this type of individual is the night watchman who sets a fire, calls the fire department, notifies the boss, then proceeds to extinguish the fire before the arrival of the fire department. You can guess the rest. He becomes a hero, the alert watchman on his toes, best interests of the organization at heart. A pat on the back from the fire department, maybe a raise in pay, at least commendation from management, and the plaudits of other plant employees. Salespeople have been guilty of this same approach to hero worship, even during working hours. They discover and extinguish a fire in a trash can or a wastebasket, a fire they themselves were guilty of starting. One vanity pyro who specialized in big fires confessed that as he stood among the bystanders watching the firemen at work, he derived great mental satisfaction in the thought that among the scores of people and firemen present, only he really knew how the fire actually started. Arson is a crime, just as much of a crime as robbery or murder. The person who willfully and maliciously sets a fire, regardless of his motive, displays a total disregard for the property and lives of others. Arsonists are criminals. As such, it almost goes without saying that every effort must be made to apprehend them and to put them where they can do no further harm, behind bars. There's little satisfaction in extinguishing an incendiary fire when you know that the maniac who started it is probably planning another. Your job, our job, the job of every man on the department is not complete until such a person is apprehended. Where do you fit in? How can you help? That's easy. Remember first, last, and always that you, as a firefighter, are the first to arrive on the scene. You are the first to observe actual conditions. Be alert. Look for the unusual, developing an inquiring mind. This doesn't mean you're to conduct an intensive investigation. Carry on with your regular work, but keep your eyes and ears open. Be a little concerned about how the fire started. Before overhauling, look around. Is there an obvious or natural cause? Can you determine the point of origin? It may lead to the cause. Take advantage of every opportunity you have to look at evidence. Learn to recognize it. The evidence at incendiary fires is referred to as a criminal agent. It could be candles, the odor of petroleum products and flammable liquids, or empty containers that held them. Cotton or paper trails from one room to another. Sometimes through holes in walls. Trails of nitrate motion picture film. Matches under irons. Or the Molotov cocktail hurled through a window. A cigarette and match combination thrown from an automobile has started many a brush fire. And timing devices, when discovered by an alert firefighter, leave little doubt as to the cause of a fire. Never handle evidence. Preserve it for arson investigators. A suspect's fingerprints may be obtained. but the fingerprints of a half a dozen firemen will prove of little value. One alert firefighter, noting a footprint on tar paper at an incendiary fire in a vacant house, called it to the attention of arson investigators. Within 3 days, the culprit was apprehended. A 13-year-old boy who admitted that he had started 12 fires within 3 weeks in a 10-block area. Always try to obtain the names and addresses of people who offer information. Arson investigators may want to talk to them. One enthusiastic firefighter really thought he had something when he was telling investigators about a gray-haired woman in a house dress who had told him she had seen a man run from the scene of a fire to a car just before the fire department arrived. She had described the car, even taken the license number. But the fireman? No, he didn't know what the license number was, nor the name of the woman who had seen it. The fire was incendiary. The culprit was apprehended, but not until the investigators had spent the better part of the night locating the woman who had seen him drive away. Try to detain suspicious persons until arson investigators arrive. Failure to do this has been responsible for many an arsonist walking away from a fire unmolested, chuckling at the seeming stupidity of firemen in general. What makes a person appear suspicious? Well, that's a hard question to answer. Circumstances alter cases. To name them all becomes impossible. But let's consider a couple of common situations. You respond to a fire at night. As you near the location, there is no loom up, no visible signs of fire. A civilian flags you down, leads you in the side door of a building, down a rear stairway, through a hall, and to a closet in a rather remote location. If this happened to you, it might be well to ask yourself, how come? How come this fellow knew so much about the fire? Does he work here? Did he set it? It would certainly pay to be suspicious, and you can rest assured an arson investigator would like to talk to him, particularly so if the cause of the fire could not be readily determined. Keep an eye on the eager beavers that show up at fires. You know, the civilians who help man the hose lines and shout words of encouragement such as, "Come on, boys, we got her licked," or "Let's move in closer, men, knock her down." Indications of intense excitement on their part should arouse some suspicion. This is not a normal thing, not an everyday occurrence. Don't pass it off as the activities of a bunch of screwballs. Make an effort to detain them, or at least find out who they are. Give arson investigators a break. On occasion, the arson detail will plant photographs or detailed descriptions of suspected arsonists in your station, with an appeal to be on the lookout for such an individual at fires. They have reason to believe they are working in your area. Give this information your close attention. Memorize the features or description. You could well be the one who meets the suspect face to face. When you're detailed to participate in stakeouts, make sure you thoroughly understand just what is expected of you, what you're to do, and especially what not to do. Follow instructions to the letter. Give the arson investigators a little credit for knowing what they're doing. Above all, remember that a stakeout can only be successful if a reasonable degree of secrecy is maintained. It becomes valueless and certainly is a waste of manpower, time, and effort if a suspect is constantly aware of your activities. Being selected to help arson investigators on a stakeout may provide an interesting break in your daily fire duty routine. Interesting enough to pass along to the wife at breakfast the next morning. But when the missus passes this information on to the butcher, the grocer, or the next-door neighbor, and they in turn pass on to their friends the story that good old Joe, the fireman who lives down the street, is now a detective tracking down the suspect who has been setting all the fires in the neighborhood, well, the harm's done. As far as the stakeout is concerned, it'll have about as much value as driving around the neighborhood with red lights on and sirens screaming. Information can be harmful if you're putting it out. Extremely helpful if you're getting it. Too much talk is bad medicine. The day following a fire, a civilian dropped into one of our stations and engaged one of the firemen in conversation. He discussed the fire, said he had watched it burn, and was curious to know how it started. The fireman, a talkative lad, pointed out that faulty wiring was the offender. He was most emphatic and kept insisting the fire could not possibly have started any other way. Arson investigators came up with a different cause. The fire was incendiary. The suspected arsonist was brought to trial. Who was he? You guessed it. The civilian who had obtained such a nice, detailed report from the fireman. The attorney for the defendant had a field day playing fireman against investigator. A case that might otherwise have ended in a successful conviction was thrown out of court. Why? Too much loose talk. There's nothing wrong with talking to people, but make sure you're getting information, not giving it. Restrict your remarks about what you know, what you saw, what you did, to your superior officers and arson investigators. And bear in mind that when you're called into court to testify, the court will not be interested in your personal opinions. They will want to know specifically what you saw, what you did, what you heard. Facts, just plain facts. No attorney will ever get you out on a limb if you make it a point to know the facts and limit your remarks to those facts. Many of the situations I've been discussing are the unusual, the exceptions, not the type of suspicious circumstances that you're likely to observe or encounter very frequently. They've been passed on to you simply as background information to help point out that the real causes of undetermined fires can be established if you know what to look for. Presuming we have a fire knocked down, have taken a little look around, and failed to find an obvious or natural cause. What then? What are we looking for? Suspicious circumstances? Certainly, suspicious circumstances and any visible evidence that may lend some proof as to the cause of the fire. Here are the things you should think about and look for prior to overhauling, if there is any doubt at all as to how the fire started. Think now. Was the fire particularly difficult to extinguish? Did it seem to be burning with greater intensity than other fires you fought in similar type occupancies? Could flammable liquids or sprays have been used? Are there any bottles or cans of the stuff around where you would not expect them to be normally? Was there evidence of separate fires on the same premises? Did there appear to be an unusual point of origin in the middle of the floor? Halfway up a wall? In a closet? Cabinet or dresser? Is there a clear-cut line of demarcation between the burned and unburned materials? Did the fire involve curtains or drapes? Were they seemingly ignited by a heater, a candle, or matches? Were trails of combustibles present, such as cotton, cloth, or film? Was an electric iron or other portable electric appliance the possible cause? If so, did you find the device where you would normally expect it to be used, or did its location make you wonder? Were there any open gas cocks? Mechanical or electrical devices at the point of origin? Were the windows and doors all tightly closed? Were the shades pinned down? Were there any signs of forcible entry that could have been made prior to your arrival? Had the cash register, cash box, desk drawers, or safe been rifled? Did merchandise appear to be missing from shelves or sales racks? Did you have trouble connecting to the hydrant? Threads have been burned by incendiarists to delay extinguishment. The first rubbish, trash can, or garage fire you respond to down some dark alley, particularly when you can't determine the cause, might be accidental, or the mischievous prank of some juvenile. But two or more of these fires, occurring reasonably close to each other over a short space of time, can certainly be taken as an indication that a pyro is on the loose. Be suspicious of the bystander who doesn't act normal, or who seems overly eager to lend his support, physically or informationally. Pay particular attention to a familiar face that keeps appearing among the bystanders at fires. Little things may seem inconsequential to you. Maybe you don't have a suspicious nature. Maybe you can't see just where they would have any particular bearing on determining the cause of a fire. Nevertheless, the rather common suspicious circumstances you've just seen examples of are highly important to the arson investigator. Guard them carefully until he arrives. They give him a lead, a starting point, a springboard from which he can plunge into an investigation from the right direction. It's the little things, bits of evidence, the unusual circumstances that don't go hand in hand with normal conditions that mean so much. They spell the difference between success and failure, between knowing how a fire actually started or having to admit we weren't quite sharp enough or interested enough to find out. Every fire has a cause, and every cause can be determined, but only through the cooperation of every firefighter on the department. The key to success is in your hands. Why not use it?